StreamYard thing, and then I'm feeling like maybe pass.
Bro, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. I've never had this issue with the StreamYard. The
Yeah,
problem that I have is that I have a Mac, so I do it on my laptop, my phone. My wife's on my laptop doing like she can put like things up on the top, and then if
yeah,
people comment, she can put it on. The problem is that my phone and my iPad are synced, so when my father called, it interrupted the internet on the iPad and
yeah.
dropped it. And then because it dropped it, it deleted our broadcast that we were in the middle of having. So I needed to recreate a broadcast to redo it again.
Gotcha. No
So
worries.
yes, and I see that you're drinking the Alchemist.
I am because this is close to me.
How
This is
how, and you
this is
also have
Vermont.
K Bar Soap Company, man.
It's because K-Bar soap. That's
Is amazing.
Clay of Mac and Clay.
Ah, see, I didn't know y'all had a podcast, man. That's dope.
Yeah.
That's So before we go into all of that awesome stuff, so back to what we were talking about being in Iraq, you were giving you were donating stuff because you were getting extra stuff from people, and you were doing that because you had family and your younger brother you said was back home.
Yep.
So why were you doing that though? Like was there a specific reason?
Why were you
Was
doing
there
what?
like
Given
why
the
were you
stuff?
why yeah, like why did you decide to do that? Like other people may not have done that.
Oh, well, we had a surplus of all the stuff we would never need. I was just going to sit there and it was either throw it away or give it to people. And we just, felt like the right thing to do is if there's people in our area that were needed something, then we had it, we should give it to them. And it was, to me, it seemed like very quickly we started realizing that the Iraqi people were human beings just like us. And it was cool to watch transition from guys be not racist because of we were racist, but you'd never been in Iraq before. The only thing that
Yeah.
we knew about Iraq was that they were the enemy and we were there to go kill bad guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But then
The
when you
culture
drive
shock.
around in their city for 6 months and you see them farming and their kids are just running around the streets and trying to go to school and they have gas stations and police stations and little bodegas and all the same stuff that we have, you're like, oh, well, they're not really that different from us other than they look a little bit different in the clothes they wear and they live in a desert climate. But other than
Yeah.
that, like when you start seeing acts of kindness and people be kind to us like for no reason, then you're like, oh shit, like I need to be kind back. And then it
Yeah.
just became mutual. And, we would do things for the kids. And then in turn, we'd watch the parents watch us be kind to the kids because the kids were just being kids. Like they didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
There was a Humvee with a machine gun on top driving down their street. They're just running around the street playing. And
Yeah.
then they see us standing on, and then we wave to them and they wave and then they come chat with us. And next thing you know, we're hopping out of the truck and goof around with these kids and they weren't scared. They didn't have a reason to be scared. So we would
Yeah.
chat with them. And it was honestly weird to see that was like the point of entry to gather intel from the locals
Hmm.
is to interface with the kids and by giving them toys and candy and, chocolata, Mr. Chocolata. And, next thing you know, they had sense of humor. They were funny little dudes and they would, there was a language barrier, but facial expressions and just body language is easy to recognize. And when they're goofing off and being funny, we would goof off and be funny, and next thing you know, you got little buddies. And then we'd give them stuff and they give us stuff back, and then you'd see the mom come walking out. He's usually that was like the kind of the order is the kid, then the mom, and then dad would always be like standing off behind. He would like be stoic and he was just like, yeah, I'm not messing with these assholes. But the mom would come over and then we'd give them shampoo and shower, whatever food. And then she would talk with the interpreter. And next thing you know, there'd be like, hey, 3 houses down, bad guys. They call them Alibaba. And so we'd be like, all right, we'll go check out Alibaba, and we go kick down the door, and next thing you know, there'd be stacks of cash and AK-47s everywhere, and we'd be like, all right, zip ties, and we'll go drop you guys off with the het team and see what we get. And then we put 1,600 people in Abu Ghraib, just us.
Oh, wow.
Within the 7 months that we were there. And our colonel claims, I don't know how many, he said it was more than that we dispatched.
Yeah.
But we got in some pretty intense firefights too. We were south of Fallujah, near the Elm ASP. We were in the Sunni Triangle, the Triangle of Death. And it was wild. We got into some firefights. I got to see what the Mark 19 really does in a real life application. So that was, and I got to watch her jam in the middle of a firefight. That was fun.
Ooh,
yeah, watching your primary weapon system decide that it was going to tap out while you need it. That was actually not a good time.
Yeah, I can't imagine how that felt. Like,
yeah, it was that was definitely up there with the worst moments of my life. When your primary weapon system is no go.
Yeah.
Actually, bullet holes in my ammo can after that firefight.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow.
The ammo can that was holding 36 grenades.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, it was good times. So yeah, I mean, the thing about that stuff, the when I look back at the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
I think my big takeaway is I've experienced moments of pure insanity. Just so when I live my life now, I have this unbelievably different like source of context.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like if I watch, and it makes me probably a little bit more for my own situations to be like, oh, this isn't so bad. But it also makes me a little less sympathetic towards others.
It's so
when I
bad,
see people complaining about the dumbest things. And I'm like, yeah, but have you ever been in a firefight and your Mark 19 stops working and you're getting shot at and bullets are hitting the grenades that are supposed to be there for your ammo, but they're actually now basically an IED right next to your face? You ever had that happen? No? Okay, so what you're telling me is you should just shut the fuck up.
Bro, I'm so glad that you brought that up because, like, I've had 105. This is my 105th episode, and all the Marines that I've spoken about, we've never talked about that. And it's so true because you've become so numb to the world, where like when you're when someone's having a bad day and you're working with civilians, and they're like, "Oh my God, we have to have a conference call at 3:00," and you're like, "This is what we're mad at? Like we're mad at this right now? Like for instance, right now at my job." The elevator hasn't been working. There is a mass email that goes out daily. Everybody, when's it going to be back up? When's it going to be back up? When's it going to be back up? Yesterday, the campus head sends out an email and he says, "Good news, we got it fixed. Bad news, they have to come back to recalibrate it, but everybody's out with COVID-19, so they can't be back for another month. So it's going to be out for another month."
And let me guess, you guys are on the second floor?
And we're on the second floor. Everybody and everyone's like bugging out. It's like, oh my God. And it's like, dude, it's it's like maybe 2 flights of stairs.
Yeah,
like,
that's actually funny because I try not to have pet peeves. I really try not to, because I think that all that becomes is just like you're telling yourself like, no, I have this trigger. So every time this happens, I'm giving myself an excuse to be angry and become an asshole.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
I try not to have pet peeves, but if there were a pet peeve, one thing that I do observe is that when I'm in an elevator and I see someone get on a floor and then get off the very next floor, I just find that I guess I changed my opinion of it. I just find it amusing. I was like, I personally would rather take, if it's like between 1 to 3 stairs or sets of stairs, I like to walk. Because at this point, I'm like, I'm starting to get older. I'm in my 40s now. And I'm like, I'm going to look back and be like, I wish, at some point, I'm like, I wish I could do the stairs. You know what I mean?
I have a buddy of mine that I did, just because we're on the stairs topic. I did an episode with this guy. His name's Scott. He's from New Jersey. and he's a double amputee and he's blind. Before he had lost his legs and his eyesight, he had done the tunnels to there's tunnels to towers, and then there's the tunnels to like where they climb the stairs of the towers.
Yep.
So he had done it before he was an amputee. So after he had lost his legs and his eyesight, he was laying in the hospital and he was like, "Hey, I want to get back and I want to do it again 6 months from now."
Yeah.
So he climbed 79 stairs, 79 state cases with no legs
Yeah.
and no eyesight. And like when he told me that story, I was like, bro, like, what? How could I ever again complain and not
Yeah.
about taking a staircase, like not taking the elevator for 2 flights of stairs? Like, if this dude did it with no legs, and then you start to look at things like that, and like you're saying, like you're seeing these things in Iraq, you're seeing these children with nothing, and it gives you more of an understanding of like, wow, like my day's never going to be that bad again.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing too is, you say my day's never going to be that bad again, but sometimes I find myself almost wishing my day was that bad again. Because that's another thing that, so you have like that context, right? You have that point in your life that everything else compares to.
Yeah.
And when it's just, I think part of it is a lot to do with my personality. But when I look at like my worst days or my best days or whatever, in my worst day, I was still feeling an extreme emotion. And when I have like a day that I'm just bored,
yeah,
I think to me, my hell is that complacent or Groundhog Day is like what I like to call it. It's like that same mundane. If it's just like the same 9 to 5 grind, yesterday is exactly the same as today and tomorrow. I usually get to that point where I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be in a firefight again.
bro. So what do you do about that? Because like that's me right now. My day is that I hate it. I hate it. Like, what do you do to? Because I cannot stand that. Like, I tell my wife all the time, bro. Like, I hate getting up, going to work. Like, I hate just we're not meant to live like that. That's not
Right.
like the life. That's not the life that I've ever wanted. And
Right.
when I was a Marine Corps recruiter, that was the life that I made fun of.
Right.
But now here I am, not on active duty, not a Marine Corps recruiter, and now here I am, you know, going to an 8 to 5 job, coming home from an 8 to 5 job, and it's like, dude, like that's just not it, man. Like that's just.
So that's a super deep question to ask. I mean, that's kind of like a meaning of life kind of question to ask.
Yeah.
So there's not an easy answer to it, but I'll do my best with what I kind of was thinking about off the top of my head. A couple things. So I basically became really depressed because of that type of situation. I didn't realize why I was becoming depressed, but after hundreds of hours of counseling and lots of inflection or reflection and as a journey of like trying to figure out who the hell I am as a person and why I tick. I realized that like just my personal personality is one of like, I need a lot of stimuli to like be interested in life. And then having an extreme amount of stimuli for a short period of time really like made me aggressively almost addicted to adrenaline and addicted to like this feeling of like intense whatever it is. So now like I've constantly searching for some sort of intensity. But the counselor that I was seeing several years ago, now it was like 4 years ago, I think, a great guy. It was interesting because I never would have expected the insights to come from him because he wasn't a combat veteran. He was not like someone that I would look at and be like, oh, this dude is going to like have all the answers. It was just like, he was a doctor, you know? But he said that I need to, and I was losing interest in the things that I enjoyed. Like I had a dirt bike at the time and I was not interested in driving it. Like it became more of a chore to like get it loaded up in the truck, drive to where I ride, unload it, then ride. And he's like, why don't you, do you really like it? And I'm like, yeah, but he's like, well, why didn't you write it? I'm like, because it's like just a chore. And he's like, that's the depression. That's the part of your depressed state that's telling you that like you're looking at all the negative sides of it. He's like, do me a favor. Just like you would schedule your work or any other thing, like your meals, anything that is part of your survival or your day-to-day like necessities. It's like those moments of hobbies or enjoyment or whatever it is need to be scheduled in your life just like that and taken as high a priority as anything else. It's part of your survival. Your mental health and your enjoyment of life are such a high priority that we overlook. He's like, you need to make that important to you. And so I did. And it felt stupid. I loaded up my dirt bike. I took it out, drove it, and it took it was probably like 20 or 30 minutes in of riding before I realized I was actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I remember calling him the next whatever session, and I'm like, I was like, you're a freaking genius, dude. Like, I don't understand why, but it was like I had to break through this mentality of like, I didn't even like the things that I actually like because I was like somehow lying to myself. And that stuff to me is still kind of, it eludes me why that is the way it is. But so now I've kind of gone on this journey of like, and my wife, I'm married. I've been married for, I think we're going on 13 years now. So we married right after I got home from Iraq. And she's gone through all the ups and downs and all the trials and tribulations, and she's been ride or die through all of it. So she's seen all of this, and she's gotten to know me just as much as I've gotten to know myself. And so the things that, and she's super, super supportive of me, and she knows, because she's not like me. She's not someone who needs like risk or.
Bro, my wife is the same way, dude.
Yeah.
I'm like everything you're saying, I relate to, because like when I was on recruiting duty, I was always out. I was always talking to somebody. I was doing something. I had to be doing something. And then I would come home from like, I'd be up at 5 a.m. and not home until 10. And then I'd be like, hey, where are we going? What are we going to do? Who are we going to go see?
Yeah.
And now that I'm in it, I work from home or I work at the office, like I'm always like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And my wife's like, why do we always have to do something?
Yeah.
Why can't we just do nothing? And I'm like, so that's how my wife is. Like, she's completely okay with never going anywhere, never going out to see anybody. Like, she's like, hey man, I don't have to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But me, I'm like I just want to go do something. Like,
yeah. Well, and for a marriage, it's really important to understand each other. So my wife tends to be more introverted, and I tend to be more extroverted. But understanding what each other prefer and what each other enjoy. And we spent, so much of our marriage kind of like battling it out, trying to get each other to adopt our own or each other's preferences versus getting to know each other and saying, oh, I didn't know that about you. I don't really understand that about you, but I think it's cool. And if that's what makes you happy and that's the way you are, then I want to encourage you to do more of that. And if that means that you and I aren't like doing everything together every minute of the day, then cool, because we're individuals. Like, you should go do what, like, we each get one life and it's short. Yeah. And so you need to spend the time that you're on this rock figuring out what it is that makes you smile and go after it hard. I mean, right when I came home from Iraq, I had a crotch rocket and I drove it like a maniac and I crashed it. And again, 6 weeks after I came home from combat, I almost died again. But that adrenaline rush was so addicting. And so, just last year, my wife bought me it's called Extreme Experience, and you go like race, like, supercars. You get to go out on a NASCAR track and you drive. So I did that. And then like the next week I got like an email saying you can do the same thing, but now it's a drag strip car. Right. So I did that, and it was like a rail car. And I was thinking like these things would be like super expensive on it. And it was a couple $100 to go down a drag strip. And I was like, so then a couple months later, I bought a hot rod 67 Camaro, and it's all tubbed out, and it's basically a drag car. So that's getting kind of worked on right now through the winter. But this next summer, that's going to be my outlet, is to go take this car to the drag strip and just go get some adrenaline. You know what I mean?
Damn, that's awesome.
And then, we live in New England, so we get, the car's not going to be on the roads. But I didn't know how to ski really well until a couple years ago. And I was like, if I live here, instead of just sitting in the house throughout the winter and being miserable, I need to find a hobby. And so I learned how to ski, and I found another Marine who lives near me, and he's a badass snowboarder.
A snowblower. He's a good snowblower. He's a
snowblower. He comes over to the house and he snowblows for me. But no, he's great. He's one of those guys that's hard to keep up with on a snowboard. And we're going to ski 3 times this week.
Oh, nice.
And so we went today, and we're going to go again tomorrow.
Oh, damn.
But that's the kind of stuff that I realized that's what makes me happy. That's what, my life needs to be filled with, is excitement. And it doesn't have to be like super extravagant, but it's just, I think it's important too for people, anyone in general. It doesn't have to be Marines or military or veterans or anything. But they have personality tests that you can take, and they're really interesting. I did one because I was kind of going through like a workforce training kind of thing, and I got some professional stuff out of it, but I got this insane amount of intuition just in my own personal life, because it explained to me what my priorities as a human being are. And they were not what I thought they were. I was living my life thinking like, this on paper is what's important to me. And then when I did this test, and it was like very important that you like answer 100% honest, even if you don't think, he's like, don't answer what you think someone would want to see you write down. Answer what you really believe. That's the most important part about it. So I did it, and I got all these things back, and I was like, wow, holy cow. Like, this stuff was not what I expected. And then I start like living my life knowing that those are my actual priorities. And it's definitely been interesting to watch and change. And then I have a lot more personal growth to do, but I can say for a fact that my life is 1,000% better than it was 3 years ago, for sure.
No doubt. So for you, how was the transition out of the Marine Corps and into the civilian world? Like, was that tough for you? Was that like trying to like having come home from Iraq and then getting out of the Marine Corps? Like, was that an issue transitioning out?
Yes and no. It's a hard question to answer with like a single sentence. But so there's a lot tied to maturity, I think, because you get out of the Marine Corps, you're still young. Yeah. At least I was. I only did one tour, and I got out right after. I picked up sergeant, and then I was done. And so I still had a lot of life, and I was like, early 20s, and you do the classic comparing civilians to the military. You're like, oh, these people are undisciplined. They're nasty. They don't do things the way we do. And all the typical nonsense that we all say. And it's true. A lot of it's true. But at the same time, like, people are people. And if you just treat everyone as if they were a human that deserved the mutual respect of being a human, I learned really quickly after moving from the South to New England that I was in a much more liberal mindset of people up here. And that was a hard transition, because I was leaving a military, and then I was also leaving a Southern style upbringing, a Midwest basically upbringing. So that was culture shock. But it was eye-opening too, because I never really considered myself remotely liberal at all. But what I do see is like the liberal mentality of like, or the root, like the core belief that people would say, like the purest version of it is to like help people. And that purest idea of that I say I would agree with. I would probably go the exact opposite approach as a classical liberal mentality, as far as like being so over the top and giving. I'm more the same mentality the Marine Corps is like earned. Would be my. So yeah, that was difficult to kind of go in. Another thing too is like I the nice thing about being a freelancer is they don't really have like a classic employee boss relationship where I don't like go to an office. I don't report to a boss and work for someone. I'm more of a contractor. And that probably helped a lot to not have to work for a company like that in that style. And then Leatherneck is, other veterans and it's, being an owner, I kind of get to kind of make my own decisions.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit easier. I will say, after doing some counseling and talking with, making a friend who was a vet center counselor, one thing that he did say to me, that kind of was mind blowing was that, I was having expectations of my wife and my kids that I would of junior Marines, how the instant obedience to orders or the discipline or the intensity or the, situational awareness, like all the things that we come to expect as the norm.
Yeah.
You have to realize that other people are not taught or have not lived that life. And so he basically said to me, he's like, yo, dude, dumbass, they're not Marines and they never will be. They've never experienced that life. They've never been to boot camp. They've never been to combat. They don't know what you have experienced and they never will. So chill out.
Bro, it's funny because like I went to a counselor when I came over from Afghanistan, but like 2 or 3 sessions. But like everything you're saying, my wife is the one who tells me this. Like my wife's like, Doug, I'm not one of your boots.
Yeah.
Or my wife's like, Doug, I'm not one of your recruiters. Stop talking to me like that. I'm gonna get it I'm gonna do it when I do it. Like I'm not doing this. So it's just funny. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, wow, I literally relate to everything you're saying.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about just picturing conversations I've had with my wife, it's funny how when your spouse says something to you, the weight that you take with that statement coming from the source versus a friend or a counselor or a professional. Like your wife could literally say, read a verbatim sentence and then you'd be like, yeah, whatever, dude. And then a counselor says it literally exact same way. But you're like, because this guy that's got like a title in front of his name, you're like, oh, fucking, I've never heard that before. And your wife's sitting next to you, be like, I've said this to you 14 times, you fucking dickhead.
My wife is watching this right now. So
I'm sure she is, and it's a good thing she is, because I tell your wife I got her back.
Bro, I can only imagine her face right now downstairs. But it's funny because, like, I do that. Like, I'll ask my wife a question. I'm like, hey, what do you think about, like, this shirt? Or what do you think about this quote? Or what do you think about this? And she'll give me her answer. And then I'll call my buddy and be like, hey, Gunny, what do you think about this? And he'll say the exact same thing she just said. And I'll be like, bro, that's a fucking great idea.
Yeah.
And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? I just said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude,
it's hard to, I think both back and forth, spouses, marriage is just such a weird institution. It's such a weird concept to me. There's so many things about marriage that just isn't taught. No one sits you down and says, all right, you're about to get married. Here's some good training. Here's a period of instruction on what it looks like.
Here's a PowerPoint.
Like you just, because you're a person and you've lived your life and you've developed habits and, priorities and, this is where you are. And now you have to commingle literally every aspect of your entire life with another person.
Yep.
And you both look at each other like, and there's so many unwritten things about marriage where you're like, well, you just expect you to like be different, like now, because we live together and I expect you to respect me. Like, how do you expect me to respect you if you don't know me? Like, you don't really know a spouse until you've lived with them for 10 years. Like, I've lived with my wife for 14 years now.
Yeah.
We have 2 kids together and we're still getting to know each other. And we've made massive growth in our marriage in the past 5 years. And it came down to, I think that it's a pivotal conversation that we had not too long ago, maybe 2 years ago, where I just really realized I need to spend more time figuring out who the hell I am as a person, because I needed to know what my priorities were in life, because I kind of felt like I was living life for others. I was living life as a dad, as a husband, as a provider, and I was doing all these things. And I'm like, whoa, where's the time for like me? I feel like I'm being put on like the last priority. And that's part of like where I was feeling very depressed, is because like everything else felt like it came first and me came last. And, I thought for sure that our marriage was about to be done. And, but I realized, I looked at other people who were getting divorced and I saw them turn into like mortal enemies. And I was like, and that to me just boggled my mind. I'm like, how do you go from, I want to spend my entire life with this person, to now I hate them?
Yeah.
I was like, where was that transition? And I was like, well, how did you do that? And so I remember we went for a drive in our car and I told my wife, I said, listen, I don't know where we're headed. I have no idea. I don't really have like any intention or desire for us to like separate, but I also am just questioning whether or not we're both not happy. So why are we doing this together? Like, why are we continuing to be unhappy? Yeah. And she was like, yeah, this is like some heavy shit. And I was like, this is like a really uncomfortable conversation we're about to have, but it's important. We're both going to feel super uncomfortable with this, but we need to like dig deeper and have a more real relationship with each other for us to really be married. And so I said,
what made you want to have this conversation? Like, where did this come about?
I reached a breaking point. I knew that there was more to life, and I knew that I was missing out on experiencing life. And I felt like I wasn't being 100% true to myself. I felt like I wasn't actually allowing myself to be me. And I felt like I was holding back because I had been telling myself that's the way I had to be because of my wife. And I was feeling resentment towards her because of it. And so we just needed to work some shit out. I said, and I told her, I was like, I don't know that you're going to actually like the real me. I think that you're going to get to, I was like, I think for me to be truly happy, I need to start being me for real. And I think that you might, and I apologize. I was like, I told her, I'm like, I'm sorry that I must have not intentionally been putting on an act. I've been acting like what I thought a husband and a father should be, but it's clearly not working out for me because I'm being something that I'm not. And I was like, maybe, and I kept coming back to like, I feel like I'm a selfish asshole. And then she said, she's like, you can't go around sustaining this lifestyle of like filling other people's cups if yours is completely empty all the time. She's like, if your cup is full, then you've got excess and you can give. But if you're not doing good for yourself first, and that was my mentality, you always have this like charitable versus selfish mentality, and everybody tells you like, you can't do that for yourself because that's selfish. Like, well, if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you be good to anyone else? Because you're lacking. Yeah. So I remember saying to her, I'm like, root down to the core. I was like, all I want to know is, or all I want to say is that I consider you my best friend. I have like guy friends, but like my wife knows me way more than anyone else does.
Agreed.
She's seen me at my 100% worst, and she's seen me at my best, and she knows she's like the one that's rooting for me always. And I said, so whatever happens in our life, I want to make sure that we build the tightest friendship that we could ever have. And like any other friendship, like barely even scratches this. I was like, because we have kids together, we've like built a life together, and I don't want to just blow that up because I feel like I need to go do something different with my life. I was like, so if we decide that we can just be best buds first, I was like, let's just do that. And then if we decide that we want to be romantic too, then let's let that part of our relationship grow. I was like, but when I think about a best friend, I think about somebody who I could tell him or her anything and not worry about what they're going to say.
Yeah.
Like I can just be so honest and so blunt and just be like, yo, I need to hit you with some serious truth, and you might not like it, but I can trust that you're not going anywhere after I tell you this.
Yeah.
To me, that's like what a best friend is. And she was like, yeah, 100%. So then we started operating on that like playing field, and it was crazy how much closer we got as friends, and then how much better our like romantic life was after it too. And we became way tighter. And now like we used to have just the worst fights where we'd be like screaming at each other, and then we'd have to sit down and like talk about the fight for 4 hours and be like 2 a.m. and I just wanted to like, why are we still talking? This is a fucking waste of time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now it's insane to think back, like how much time, like I can see the couch that we sat on this couch and just, I remember staring at the wall. Like we just hate, not like necessarily hate towards her, but hate towards the situation. And I couldn't I'm like, how do you ever make progress in a marriage when all you feel is hate?
Yeah.
And like anger and resentment. And I was like, we need to like, why are we just angry at each other? This is stupid. And this is not the way to live. So yeah, we've made some serious strides. And
dude, it's just awesome hearing that though, because like we're surrounded, especially in the world in which we live in, you're surrounded by people who would have just taken the ladder and said, hey, you know what, let's just go our separate ways. And even with children, you know, people are like, hey, man, it is what it is. Like, whatever. We're just not going to put in the time. So it's awesome to hear that, like, you and your wife did that and that you're still doing it because it's onward movement. Yeah. But so how, like, now when this was going on, like, did your kid, like, how old are your children?
Got two boys who are 10 and 12.
Okay. So were they cognizant of what was going on or not really? Like, it was just like,
oh, yeah. Yeah. Our youngest is very aware. And we would do a good job. We had moments where we would be yelling at each other and they could definitely hear it. But we, even in our worst, I think, tried hard. One of us, usually her, would be aware that the kids were listening or watching, and she'd try to like cool me down. I just had, part of being a Marine, especially being in combat and especially being a machine gunner, where your mentality that's been imprinted on your soul is fire superiority. Mm-hmm. You see an objective and you see an opposing force, and your only tool in your pouch is to suppress with fire and overcome and obliterate and, push through the objective and come out the other side with nothing but a wake of destruction behind you. Like that's your only understanding of how winning something works. Because I remember my wife saying all the time, she's like, I'm not your opponent. I'm not your opponent. I'm like, well, you're fighting me. Yeah. You're fighting me like what?
Wow. Bro,
so now,
that's crazy that you've identified that. Like, because a lot of people wouldn't have identified that about the situation. And a lot of people don't correlate that. They don't say, hey, this is how I've been trained, and now this is my life, and this is the way I go at these things, because that's just the training that I received. And now, even through on my 30s, 40s, 50s, the rest of my life, I go back to that, because that's what I was trained to do. So it's crazy that you through your counseling and through your conversations, that you've been able to correlate that to your conversations with your wife.
A lot of it has to do with, I think, one of the first steps is identifying and accepting or admitting you have an ego. And then allowing someone I think, when you said you had a couple sessions of counseling, I would encourage you, even if you feel like things are great, go get some more counseling. Because people have given the idea, like even in the Marine Corps, we called the counselor the wizard, and we made it into like this negative thing. Like if I go see a therapist, like I must be broken. I'm like, no, you don't expect to pick up a rifle and be instantly proficient with it. Like no one says, here's your M16, now go fucking be an expert with it or you're done. You know what I mean? Like they give you weeks and weeks of staring at a goddamn barrel, without even bullets in your magazine. And then you build from like such a base level understanding and you work on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with your own personal life. Like there's just so much about life that we don't get taught. And the whole purpose of going to a counselor is to say, yo, dude, the feelings that you're feeling are legit normal. Even though you're a combat veteran, you're a Marine and all these other things, like, yeah, I get it. You've got PTSD. Yeah, so does everybody else. Like people, combat veterans in general, like to latch onto this, like, I have PTSD and it's broken and it's changed my life. I'm like, so does the kid who watched his parents get killed in a car accident. So does, all even the small versions. People react to PTSD in different directions. And the reason they do it is because your brain has saw something traumatic and now it has started working on protecting itself from ever feeling that emotion again. But your brain doesn't know that when you do things to protect yourself from pain, that a lot of times it's the worst thing you could possibly do. Our defense mechanisms are for survival. They're not for consistent living. They're just from that momentary, I don't want this moment. But when you live that way, that's when the PTSD symptoms like take over and your life becomes this pointless day-to-day, shit show. And so and you got to find a counselor that's good. Like they're not all great. You got to kind of go in there with the same, mentality of anything else. Like, can I relate to this guy or girl? Do I trust them? It takes a while to build trust and you're going to have to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a super hard thing for men in general. Cause you don't want to go into a counselor session and just lay it all on the line. You know what I mean? You got to kind of like peel it back in layers. But if I was going to give anyone advice for ever going to a counseling session, you should go in there with goals. You should go in there, do some serious like soul searching and figure out what your goals for your life are, like, and write them out and be like, yo, I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I don't want to be a dickhead. I want to be able to, whatever it is that you want, write it down and then share that. Because when you go to a counseling session and they just start being like, well, tell me what bothers you. And you start like, no one wants to listen to a bitch fest. You know what I mean? Like complaining about everything. But if you went to any person of any kind of like just picture like a teacher or a coach or anything. If you say like, if you just start complaining at them, they're gonna be like, I don't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? But if you say, yo, here's where I'm at in life and here's where I want to be, they're gonna be like, cool, that's something for me to work with. Let's just figure out how you get there. That's what you should look at a counseling session like. It's just, I want to make progress in these areas. How do I get there?
So what are your goals? What is your future endeavor? What is your hopes for the future for yourself?
So my personal priorities in life, the things that I consider the most important are freedom and creativity. And then I'm an extrovert, so I like to hang out with people, enjoy time with people, I like to have fun. So I'm working really hard to hustle, make, decent money and put as much of that away as I can for a solid retirement. I want to be kind of like, I guess I have a few more things where I want to grow to where I feel so solid with who I am, that I just feel resilient is my kind of core word where it doesn't really matter what happens around me, that I can just still remain unscathed or unfaltering by it. Like it just, like I am who I am. It doesn't matter what's going on around me. I want to be a good example to my kids. And then, I want to move somewhere warm and have palm trees in my life and be out on the water fishing a lot. Because my life, to me, like the ideal life is a lot less work than play. I like to work hard, but I like to play harder. So that's kind of my ideal lifestyle, is to play as hard as, people you see, you're like, God damn, why does that guy get to do all those things? And I look at people like that and I don't feel jealous. I want to go have a conversation with that guy and be like, dude, why do you have that car? Or why do you have that boat? Or why do you have that lifestyle? How'd you get there?
Yeah.
And I bet, people I've met that I asked that question, most of them will be like, cool, man, I'll teach you. I'll show you. Here's what it is. And they'll lay it out. And sometimes it's like, it sounds like it's black magic, but it's really not. It's just consistency and hard work and, being disciplined in the short term so that you can have a goal achievements in the long run. And I've done some pretty crazy things with my life that I would have never thought I'd been able to do. And I've done, and I just want to keep pushing harder and doing more fun things in my life. And I like podcasts, and I'm writing a book right now. The more that I can share, because I've felt like I've gone so far from where I was and made so much progress that I feel like it's my responsibility. I think my favorite part about the Marine Corps was the educational side of it. I loved how serious they took training. I loved that they pushed towards a perfection in proficiency. Perfect practice equals perfection. Like all those things. Like when they gave me the rifle and they started giving me like instruction on how to be an expert marksman.
Yeah.
I was like, that's all I wanted. I wanted to be the best marksman in the battalion. And I was one of the first Marines to get the ACOG because I was one of the better shots.
Wow.
And I loved that. And I loved when you taught something and then they were like, hey man, school circle, go teach your guys about this shit. And I loved getting my guys together and being like, yo, I just learned this and I'm going to teach you. So I do really enjoy talking about the things that I've learned in an instruction style. So I think that would probably be another one of my goals, is to, because there's just, I see so many people who struggle with all the shit that I've struggled with.
Yeah.
And I just think it's pointless. There's no reason why people should struggle with the things that I struggle with. There's no reason why we can't all have awesome relationships with our wives. There's no reason why we can't all be awesome dads and awesome friends and awesome employees and awesome bosses. Because most of the shit that you see that you're like, what the fuck is going on with this world? It's just like people kind of fumbling around and not really behaving the best way they possibly could.
Dude, right?
And I just think that...
No, I agree. It's like some of it's just common sense. Like, hey, man, hold the door open for someone and say thank you. Like, hey, man, just be a normal human being. Just say hi to somebody. Like, it's like the simplest stuff.
I got a friend who's a vet center counselor. He actually retired, and unfortunately, it wore him out. He was an Army medic, and then he joined. He did vocal rehab counseling first, and then vet center counseling, and it just wore him out. He just saw so many people hurting all the time, and he did whatever he could to help them, but so many people chose suffering instead of peace and prosperity and all these things that you could have done with their lives, and it just wore him out. But he stays consistent with his message. And I see him on Facebook all the time, and his message is always choose kindness. Like that's what he preaches always. Yeah. And I'm like, that's like one thing that I could be so much better on a daily basis is just like, for me, road rage was a big deal. I got a big lifted truck and I would get so pissed off about how stupid people are. But
That's still my problem. It's funny because when I was on the phone with the VA doing my claims, the woman was like, "So, do you find that when you drive, you flail your hands, scream, and hit the hit the steering wheel?" And I was like, "Yeah, isn't that everybody?"
yeah,
And she was like, "Do you have roid rage?" I was like, "Well, yeah, doesn't everybody?" And she was like, "Well, no, you're not supposed to."
yeah.
And I was just like, "Wait a minute." So I was like, "Oh wow, this is not a good thing that I'm banging in my head against it, and I'm screaming, and I'm flipping people off, and I'm holding the
The porn, yeah.
yeah,
So I think too, kind of a big problem that I have with the veteran community in general is the adoption of the word disgruntled as
hmm
if it were cool.
yeah,
And I'm like, so what you're telling me is you're pissed off, you're mad, you're sad, you're depressed, you're a dick, and that's what you choose to be your life forever.
yeah,
And you're going to say that as if it's cool. I'm like,
yeah,
I've lived that life. I know what it feels like. I know what it's like. And I can tell you when I'm being 100% honest with myself, it ain't fucking cool. It's
yeah,
miserable. Why would I want to be disgruntled?
bro.
You know what I want to be? I want to be successful. I want to be happy. I want to
Yeah,
be an awesome example for my sons. I want to be a super kind, sweet gentleman to my wife. And I want people who interact with me on a day to day basis leave their life is slightly better because they hung out with me for a bit
yeah,
versus I don't
yeah,
ever want to
man.
see that dickhead again because every time I'm around him, he's a jerk. And
Yeah.
so that would be if I was putting up billboards everywhere, I'd be crossing
No,
the
and
word
it's yeah,
disgruntled off
man,
and I'd be like,
dude.
go back to like what I remember in boot camp. They would talk to us about Marines were like knights in shining armor. Like we were
Mhm.
these guys who were like a cut above the rest. Like we were the dress blues with the sword and we were bright and shiny and we were like, nothing mattered. Nothing got to us because we were the fucking best in everything. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they looked up to us and you see that and you're like, okay, cool. What does that look like? Well, that looks like a gentleman. That looks like a guy
Yeah.
who holds the door open for a lady and says kind words to people and is
Yeah.
professional and honest and has all those, characteristic traits that we remember from boot camp. We're leaders, we're men who change the world and we do good. Like we're good guys. That's the good
Yeah.
guy. That's what we are. But if you're
Yep.
running around being a dickhead and being mean and swearing and punching people and getting into fistfights and road rage and all these different things and wearing shirts that say, stand on my flag and I'll kick your ass. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool. I get it. The flag means a lot to us. But also, does it mean that you just have to like pop off and like start fighting people randomly over it? Because
Yeah.
that's not what I would want my memory to be is I just run around randomly punching Americans who didn't
Yeah.
agree with me. Aren't we fighting for freedom of speech and freedom and all these things? But then we're going to run
Yeah.
around and act like we're going to tell people what to do too. So
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot there. Obviously,
No,
I can run
bro.
my mouth for
No,
hours on end.
dude, because I agree with you, man, and it's, and that's one of the main reasons why I started my podcast is because, I wanted to speak to people like yourself, entrepreneurs, people who are doing different things with their Marine Corps traits, and because all you ever hear about is people who, are disgruntled veterans who got out of the Marine Corps and can't stand the Marine Corps, or they get out and they don't do anything with their abilities and they blame all of it on the Marine Corps and they blame it all on PTSD and woe is me and all this shit. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, why don't we do something about it? And like you're saying, with the fact that everything that you and your wife have gone through, everything that you've gone through with your sons, everything that you've gone through with PTSD or depression, like all of those things that you've gone through, you can now use those things to teach somebody else, hey, before you go through these things, you don't have to go through them because I've already gone through them for you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. Like, and that's the part that sucks about life, but that's the beauty of life. And that's why we go through those storms. That's why we go through those seasons, is so that we can tell other people about those seasons so they don't have to live through them. Or if you see a friend who is living through that season, you can be like, hey man, I know what you're going through because I've been there, but maybe these are some things that you should try out. You know, maybe these are some things that you should try to do or whatever. And it's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I kind of want to just go over before we end this and cap it up is your podcast. What do you guys talk about? Do you just bullshit? Is it like what is the premise? What's the purpose of it? Why'd you start it?
So I started Outside the Wire podcast 3 years ago, and it was right after I had finished going through like a 2 week I can't remember what it was called. It was through the home base program, kind of funded by the Red Sox Foundation. It was in Boston, but it was a 2 week intensive ICP, intensive clinical program, I think it was called. But anyway, it was basically like I was at the point where I'm like, I'm so lost and depressed and frustrated and angry, and I just legit don't even know. My life it can't continue down this path. I'm done. And so they put you up in a hotel. You do 8 hours a day, classroom style, legit, like intensive. Let's pick your life apart and figure out what's going on and give you some actual tools. And it started out basic as shit, like breathe. Like if you feel angry, count to 10 and breathe. Like as simple as that. And then it built on that. Like once you're chill and you've breathed and you've taken yourself from threat con delta whatever flames flying everywhere down to like I'm back to me again. Now what do we do? Now how do we identify the problem at the root and start making some progress? And so I started the podcast to talk about that. And I started with another Marine who was also a combat veteran Marine in 2003. He was in an AAV in Iraq and got hit in the face with an RPG and blew half his face off. And so this dude had been through some serious physical trauma. And so he and I started the podcast together. Great dude. Lives in my town, or lives in my state, a couple towns over, and he's a police officer now. And great guy. We didn't quite have the humor chemistry on the podcast, but we had, a lot of good shit to talk to, a lot of good shit to talk about. COVID hit, and then he wasn't as able to come to my house and do the podcast with me. And then I met the owner of K-Bar Soap, and we started the Mac and Clay kind of shenanigans. We just have a very similar sense of humor. We met on Instagram, and over the past couple of years became super tight, best friends. We were in Iraq right around the same time. Both
that's dope.
Sergeants, both, just like salty ass war dogs. Like, you know what I mean? Like we just get it. We just click on everything. So I had him as a guest on my podcast because he was a business owner. He's a Marine, combat veteran, and I thought he'd be great. And this cat shows up and he's like, "Hey man, I like your podcast, and I read this book by Brene Brown." And I'm like, "Who's that?" And then my wife's like, "I know Brene Brown," and she's like, all excited. And he's like, "It's a book about vulnerability." And I was like, "I got an idea. It's my podcast, but you host it. You run the podcast. I'll be your guest." I was like, "Just flip it. You tell me all about your book. Give me a little book report, and you do it." And so he does this book report. It's all about vulnerability, and he talks about like, how important it is to like be able to actually be real, authentic, even though it's uncomfortable. If you want to really like make growth in your life, you're gonna have to like actually say like, "This is why I'm actually upset, because I'm totally insecure and I'm upset about this. And I don't know what you're going to tell me next. And I might feel even more embarrassed, you know what I mean? Whatever, but how important it is to actually make personal growth." And so I talked to him like after the show, I'm like, "Dude, it's cool that you were like that genuine and real and honest. Like most jars would show up on the show and be like, 'Yo man, let's talk about combat and badassery, and I smoke cigars and I wear cool tough guy t-shirts, and you know what I mean?' And I'm like, this dude was just different, and but not that different. Like he's still a war dog. Like, dude, he's a normal.
I loved it, man. When I had him on he was like one of my first guests, dude. It was an amazing conversation. Like me and him were talking about doing another episode. I just haven't gotten back with him, but Like it was a great conversation about
Yeah,
like
he's a good
everything.
dude. We
Yeah,
became best friends. We did
that's awesome.
we both turned 40 right around the same time. So we had a 40th birthday trip, and I went down to South Carolina where he's at, and we went fishing with
Nice,
Matt from Vets Fishing, and we liked it so much, so we just booked another trip for June of this year.
nice.
And but so then we realized that we had like very similar sense of humor, and we were different, and we kind of like um, what's the
Complete each
word?
other.
Yeah, and so we yeah, it's the Mac and Clay show. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
that's
we're a little
awesome.
too busy to be consistent with it, but we built a YouTube channel. We had like 2 million views on YouTube, and
Oh shit.
just making fun of the Marine Corps and making fun of the military and just being silly and funny, and but then also I think if that was going to be my ideal approach to mental health, is like suck you in with humor
Hmm.
and then hit you with like a dose of like reality and truth and be like, yo, brother, I know you're laughing at that joke, but let's talk about like why you dickhead to your wife.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So that's the podcast. It's just kind of being real, talking about, whatever I feel like talking about in the moment, and trying to be as authentic and honest and real. And it's all about self improvement and being better human being, and tying that into like my experiences, partially as being a Marine, but also just being a man, a husband, a father,
Yeah,
and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's Outside the Wire podcast. It's available on iTunes and Spotify.
that's dope, man. Well, thank you for everything. I think this was a very well. I know that it was a very different episode. It was an awesome episode. I'm glad that you were like as vulnerable as you were. I'm glad that you opened up about your family. I'm like, and it means a lot, man, to learn about things like that because like me and my wife, we've been together 13 years. But where we have two kids. They're young. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and then I have a third one on the way. So like, it's awesome to hear like the ways that you're dealing with your marriage because now it's like, oh shit, maybe I need to have that conversation with my wife, or maybe there's things that we need to do, and it's awesome because you know conversations like this are going to open up other people's minds,
Yeah,
and that's
100%.
really all, that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, a big goal for my podcast was not so much like my goal was never to be preachy. Like, I don't want to, like, I see all these people who would like podcasts and like these, like, I'm going to tell you how to do it, man. Like, here's my 10-step approach to being a better human being. Like, okay, cool, man. Get the fuck out of here. Like,
Yeah,
my
stop,
approach is
stop.
like, yo, dude, I've lived it. It sucks. And there's a
Yeah.
better way. And
Well, and
you
the
can
thing,
legit do whatever you want with it. But I'll tell you what I did. And if you were
yeah.
interested in hearing it, try it out. Let me know what you think. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is too that we have to remember is that like we're all different people.
right.
So the way that you react to something is different than I'm going to react to it. The way
Yeah.
that because everything that you just told me may never work for me in my relationship, but
Right.
that's not what matters. What matters is that you brought it up, and
Yeah.
it's something that maybe is a tool that I put in my toolbox. But that's the whole point of these conversations. Is it's never to come off like, hey, this is the only way, because there isn't only one way.
Right.
There's many ways, but all that matters is that you're transparent enough to share those ways with things. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
and like what you were talking about before, it's crazy because like there's people that have gone through marriage their whole like for 40, 50 years but never share anything about it. Like my
Right.
father. My father was married to my mother for 17 years, then they got split up, and then he was married to another woman for however many years. He hasn't gotten that one right. But yet you don't give me any advice. It's like,
Yeah.
bro, like you've been down this road. Like
Yeah.
why are we not talking about this road that you've already traveled on?
Well, my wife actually kind of opened my eyes to this, because I think people generally tend to slide towards the path of least resistance,
Mm,
which usually means comfort zone, and it means
mm,
no vulnerability. So, like on a daily basis, you think about the conversations that you have with your friends, your spouse, your whatever, coworkers. You
Yeah.
don't ever, out of the blue, be like, "Yo, let's get super deep right now. I want to tell you about some shit that I'm going through, and I want to hear your opinion." People are like, "Whoa, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to do that."
Yeah. Yeah.
But you got
Yeah.
to. So, like Clay, he and I do it all the time, like daily, because you know why? We've developed that relationship together. So he'll call me and be like, "Yo, I just had this like blowout with this person, whatever, and I'm pissed." And and then I'll play devil's advocate, or lots of times I'll just be like, "Yo, what do you want from me?" And he's like, "I just need to vent." I'm like, "Cool," and I'll say it. And I'm like, "All right, do you want my opinion?" And he was like, "Yeah, actually, you know what? I do want your opinion." And I'm like, "All right, well, I think in this instance, you could have done these different things better,
Oh wow.
and I would have done this differently." And then he'll stop and think and be like, "Yeah, dude, I never even thought about it that way." And then I was like, but I don't ever give him any shame. I don't ever act like he did anything wrong. I just say, "Hey, I'm an outward or outside, you can give me the whole picture and I'll just tell you like what I see from my perspective. And then you can do whatever. I don't care what you do. It's your life. I don't have zero
Yeah.
judgment. But at least now you got a sounding board who's willing to like hear you
That's
and
awesome.
talk to your deepest, darkest secret. And I won't tell shit. I won't tell that to anybody. I'll take that to my grave because it's none of my
Yeah.
business. But if my goal is just to like hear you out and help you, then cool, I'll do it. And so we talk, we do it all the time. We do it for like business, we do it for relationships, we do it for like just random like I just had this conversation with this person and I want to punch his face in. And I was like, "Man, did you count to 10? Did you breathe? Did you like what did you expect to like what's the best case scenario for this situation?" And be like, "Oh, actually not punching the dude in the face and not ending up in jail would have been the best." And I was like, "All right, well, why not, maybe when you like got to this point in the conversation and you realized shit was going sour, maybe you could have like done this instead." And then we like joke about it and we'll be like, "Yo, so next time, what do you think you'll do different?" And we kind of like actually like challenge each other. But the whole goal of that relationship is like, we'll tell each other, "I want to be a better whatever." And then we hold each other
Mm.
accountable. And I was like, how many people have that in a friendship with
Yeah.
someone? I
I
would say
don't.
probably nobody.
Yeah, I don't have that now.
And I think that's
That's
so
wow.
important to have in your life, like someone who, and I try to do it with my dad, and he's like starting to come around, but I do it with my wife. I mean, we challenge each other. We had some awesome conversations last night. My wife's, interested in making some career changes, and I give her advice, but I also like try to do it in a way that's not like preaching at her and telling her what to do. But it
Mm.
comes from a place of like, I want your best, most like awesome uh, outcome for this
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And when someone's like rooting for you and like, you know, got your back or in your corner,
Yeah.
it's refreshing to have conversations with people when it's like not just like, "How's the weather? How was the game? How was the surface level shit?" When you like starting
Yeah.
getting deep with people, having deep relationships with people becomes like so much more impactful and real, where you start craving it more. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I have some friends who won't do that, and I just see them as like surface level friends.
Yeah.
And if I'm like going through something, I know that if I'm going through something, I'll call Clay up and be like, "Yo, dude, I just like I got like some shit going on. What do you think?" And just by saying it out loud to another person and having them hear it, sometimes is all I need.
Yeah.
And it's like a pressure release valve. You're like, "Ah, got that off my chest." And then you
Hmm.
don't bring that with you the rest of the day.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's the kind of shit that I'm trying to make cool. I'm trying
Bro,
to like talk like that and be like, "Yo, no,
yeah.
this is what's cool. This is being a disgruntled veteran's not cool. Being a vulnerable, real guy with like his whole perspective in life is trying to be better than he was yesterday. That's
Yeah.
cool."
Yeah. No, it is. Dude, it's just it definitely is, man, because it's just like you said yourself, man, like you have two sons that are looking up to you as a model and they need to know how to live life.
Yeah.
And that's you. And if you were that disgruntled veteran who's coming home yelling at your wife for whatever reason, or dinner's not done on time, or the house isn't clean, or all this stuff, And then your kids are like, okay, well then I'm gonna talk to mom like that, or
Yeah.
I'm gonna react to mom like that. And then you turn around one day and you're like, hey, why are you talking to your mother like that? And it's like, well, because you talk to my mother like that. And
Yes.
and it's
Exactly.
like, bro, and it's just, you think it's common sense, but it's just not. But well, man, listen, thank you so much, man. I definitely have to have you back for another episode
Oh yeah,
because
for sure. Absolutely.
I feel like we could go now that everything got figured out and we're back on live. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Definitely go to. So where can people find you? Website, Instagram, social media.
So leatherneck4life.com is where we sell our apparel. At Leatherneck4life is my Instagram page where we, basically we do a little bit of the apparel, but I mostly just Marine Corps memes. I do a little bit of sketching and drawing on my Instagram page at Knuckle Dragger blog. And then for our YouTube channel is the Enlisted Club. And then the Outside the Wire podcast. And then you can find me on those platforms. And I got a bunch of random shit that I'm working on. I'm writing a book.
All right, awesome.
And at some point, I'll talk more about that. Maybe when I'm closer to having that done, I'll come back on your podcast and we can talk about my book.
Let's do it, man. Definitely, bro. Well, thanks again for coming on, man. I hope you have a good rest of the night, and I look forward to seeing some memes and bullshitting later on in life.
Yeah, buddy. Awesome. Thanks.
Right.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot,
Take
brother.
care. We'll see you.